Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show on Indian television right now where you, the MSME, get center stage to voice your opinions and thoughts. This is ETNA, special daily initiative to give MSMEs and entrepreneurs the opportunity to be front and center on every industry and area that matters to you. On Influencer tonight, we bring you a conversation with Podar World School, and on Leader Focus, we bring you a segment on finance. Tonight on Influencer, we bring you a conversation with Raghav Podar, the chairman of Podar World School, on how technology is changing the way children are learning today in India, and lessons for you, the MSME entrepreneur. Take a look. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow, Raghav. We love talking about the kind of changes that every industry has seen, and I want to look at a very short time frame for the education space. Let's look at the last 5 years, and it has changed and changed massively. One or two things that have really led that change, in your opinion?
You know, Sunanda, it's so ironic you ask that question, because the more things change, the more things stay the same. You look at the government today, in the last 5 years, let's say, the amount of interest in actually bettering the quality of education has changed from previously. So when we attended education shows, conferences, conclaves around the world, maybe if there was an Indian representative from the government, they would probably come to get a photo taken or get a ribbon cut or something like that. Now the difference is that they're actually there as part of the conferences, learning best practices from other countries. What are other people doing? They actually want to make a difference in the quality of education. So it's so heartening to see that.
So that is the change, but what has stayed the same then?
The one thing that stayed the same is our over-obsession for marks. As a country, we are so obsessed with marks, where we think marks are the be-all, end-all of the child's life. The dominant culture of education has become one of testing rather than that of learning. What is education about? What is schooling about? Why should a child go to school? It's about learning. Unfortunately, it's become about getting into the best college. That is something that as a country we need to change. We can't continue being an over-obsessed country with marks, because a lot of these exams are basically memory retention tests.
Fair enough. And how are institutions like yourself then trying to bring about that change? Can institutions change it, and how are they doing it?
We have to be within the ambit of the boards of education that we are affiliated to, but yet we are trying to bring in more holistic kind of learning, because what you need to change is the mindset. Unfortunately, it's a mindset of people that still believe that unless I get good marks or my child gets good marks, I don't care if he can horse ride well or sing well or play a sport well or do something that's different well. Something that's really interesting, the top 10 most in-demand jobs of 2010 did not exist in 2004. What are we preparing kids for then today? The children who are in school today will be entering the workforce in, say, 10 or 20 years from now. They are going to be entering jobs that don't exist today. They will be solving problems that we don't even know are problems yet. They will be using technologies to solve those problems that haven't even been invented yet. So the uncertainty is fascinating. We're preparing them for lives 20, 30 years from now, when we don't know 5 years from now what it's going to look like. So it's an interesting time to be in education, but people who have passion for it, you know, it really will allow them to make a difference in the future of the country.
Okay, so you were speaking very briefly of the government. I'll come back to that, but let's talk about your journey at the Podar World School and Podar Group of Institutions. Just give our viewers a brief sense of the journey that has been so far.
So the journey most people don't even realize is really long. My great-great-grandfather, Seth Anandilal Podar, started the first institution with founder trustees Madan Mohan Malviya, Jamnalal Bajaj, and founder president Gandhi ji as the first president of the trust. So in some sort of way, I have big shoes to fill. So it's been a long journey, but another way to look at it is it's still a short journey. There's so much more to do and so much more to go ahead.
Okay, I will definitely ask you about your future plans, but business is always started keeping the end goal, which is profit or ROI in mind.
Yeah.
Would the same thing apply for education?
No. I think for education, you need to focus more about the difference you're making in the child's life. That's what gets my creative juices flowing. If I'm going to classrooms and seeing how children are actually increasing their own potential, You see children who were, when they started school, they were shy, they were nervous, they didn't have confidence. And then you see the difference when they're graduating. That's something that really is, I think it's far more valuable than ROI. I think it's far more valuable than any balance sheet.
But you can make money, right, in this business?
You can make money in the preschool side of things, but you cannot make money in the high school. And essentially, that should not be your driving force. Your driving force needs to be making a difference in the future of this country, because children might be about 30–35% of the population, but they're 100% of our future. That's really what should be the driving force. That's my little bit of advice I would give to budding entrepreneurs or MSMEs, that let the passion be your driving force, not necessarily only the ROI or the balance sheet.
Okay. The government has been taking a lot of steps to regulate the education space.
Yeah.
Are you happy with what we're seeing now? What changes do you want to see?
It's a catch-22. There are some things that require regulation. It's good that you need people from just doing what they want. But at the same time, it's more important that the government, before doing these regulations, listen to the voices of all the stakeholders. They actually are listening and learning from best practices. There's no point. We've had people who've come to inspect our premises and they've been like, you know, why is these tables put in collaborative spaces? Like, why are 8 children sitting around a table? They should be theater style. Everyone is sitting and looking at the class. But that's not how education works. If that's the kind of regulation you're trying to provide through a government body, you don't know education well enough.
So then, in your advice, in your opinion, how does regulation keep pace with the changes we're seeing in education?
By actually going out into different countries, the top countries of the world, the top educational countries of the world, and learning from them. Or even if you can't do that, you don't have the governmental budgets for that, there are education experts who will be happy to help with these things. Education schools are not about competition. They're about collaboration. We are happy to share our best practices with other schools, and that's something that can really help the government when they are forming regulation to actually have the interests of the child in mind, rather than interests of maybe a political agenda or something that would do well in a media report. That's not what it should be. If the child is benefiting, that's the only thing that can matter.
I want to talk about government regulation and really the change that such regulation is going to bring about, and specifically talk about GST. I know it's going to be a minimal impact, but still that 3% is going to be a huge impact for MSMEs. How do you suggest that they really sort of prepare for this post-GST regime?
Education was exempt from service tax. It's also exempt from GST. So parents who are paying fees don't have to pay any GST on it. However, if as a school you have taken any premises on rent, previously you were paying 15% service tax, now you're going to be paying about 18% of GST. Even on your purchases of stuff like school furniture, electronic items, IT furniture, computers and projectors and all of that, that has changed depending on the product. It has increased, so yes, there is some impact, but thankfully it's not a game changer.
Okay, so you would say that the impact for MSME is not going to be so huge.
Yeah, it's not.
Okay, yeah. Innovation in education. And you've been, talking about how regulation hasn't really kept pace, but how does one innovate in this space?
Unfortunately, India is not very good at innovating in terms of education yet. At the current time,
although we have a rich history of having been one of the front runners when it comes to education.
We used to be one of the front runners. We used to be the research hub of the world. Now, unfortunately, we are basically seeing what's going on around the world and copying and making better versions and cheaper versions of it, which is also good. But there's not enough research into our pedagogy, into metacognition, how to think. That is what should actually be the focus of what our research goes into. We are not very good at it right now. But we can obviously improve on models that the other countries are doing. So the latest brouhaha in education circles across the world is about VR and AI. VR is basically virtual reality and AI is artificial intelligence. So virtual reality is where you get the child to wear this headset, and it's a very immersive lesson, and the child is a 360 degree, he looks up, it actually moves around and all that. But if you ask me honestly, I think it's a fad that is just going to pass with time because they don't have enough content. The actual headset is a little heavy. When I wore it for 10–15 minutes, my head was hurting, and I'm an adult. I can't imagine what it would be for a kid. Content is not good enough yet. AI, artificial intelligence, is, I think, the next big thing. It goes beyond just the cool and the wow factor to actually delivering value. where we have this little cute robot who becomes a friend of the student. We are piloting it in a few centers at the moment, and the children really go and make friends with the robot. They can talk to it, it responds. The teacher can feed in questions, multiple choice quizzes, and do revision with the children through the robot and get a live analysis of which child is performing how. So it's really, really interesting. I think that's going to be the future of innovation for schools in India next.
How do you see more widespread integration of AI though, as far as schools go?
It's going to be a tough one because it's expensive. It is going to be expensive. Yes, there were plans a few years ago when they came up with the Akash tablet, and they said that's going to like totally revolutionize technology in even a universal sort of education. Unfortunately, it did not pick up. The Akash tablet did not last too long, and it's not something that went through all strata of society. AI, as it becomes a bigger deal, the cost will start going down. But that's still a few years away, I think.
So are you seeing enough of your peers innovating in this space? Because that's going to drive the cost down, right?
Exactly. That is what's going to drive the cost down. But no, I don't think there's enough. I think people are still too excited about their smart classrooms, which is basically your interactive whiteboard and projectors and visualizers. That's all passé. In the West, in the developed world, no one's even talking about that anymore. But we are still, in most schools in India, pretty excited about the smart class or the electronic classroom, which needs to move.
Okay. Do you think government incentives could perhaps encourage innovation?
They could. They could absolutely encourage innovation. But my concern is not necessarily only about innovating it or coming up with better technology. My concern is how do you actually implement that in the classroom? So while there have been good incentives given in the past, the teachers are not necessarily skilled enough to utilize that technology to better the lesson outcome, the learning outcome of the child. If the child is not benefiting, then I'm sorry, that fancy piece of IT is just a piece of furniture. What's the point of it? So it needs to be a 360-degree kind of approach, a turnkey approach where you don't just give the classroom all this fancy equipment. You need to train the teachers. You need to monitor that they're actually using it and how are they using it. Just showing a PPT to a child is of no real added value.
Sure. Wish you all the very best, Raghav. Thanks so much for speaking with us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Thanks.
Time for a break. On the other side, we'll bring you a special finance focused segment. Just stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight on Leader Focus, we're bringing you a segment with entrepreneurs Vivek Desai, Chairman of CFMS, Amit Thakkar, co-founder of Market Pulse, in conversation with Vishal Thakkar, Director of SME Consulting. He is also the co-founder of Contractor Universal. Take a look. Today we have some very special MSMEs, and of course Vishal, who's no stranger to us here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. And let me then introduce our MSMEs, Vivek as well as Amit, and let's maybe kick this off by very quickly asking you to describe what you do.
Sure. I run a facility management firm. Essentially we are helping people manage their properties better. We extend services like housekeeping, repairs, maintenance, just to name a few. Apart from that, we run a firm called Nat Venture Holidays, which basically we are creating camping sites, and we are in the domain of educational tourism for children.
Very interesting, very fascinating. What about you, Amit?
So Market Pulse is essentially democratizing access to financial markets. We provide a whole bunch of tools and insights and intelligence to actually enable the traders to take their own trading decisions. So we actually just empower them to take the future into their own hands.
So we're talking finance today, and finance is something that everyone needs, everyone wants, and at the same time it's also a double-edged sword. That is, if you're not able to manage it well, then it's something that could possibly backfire, especially for MSME. So I understand you have some questions for Vishal.
Yes, Vishal, how can I plan my financial statements better to get better access to debt? because in our entire journey, we've been so badly planned on the financial statement side. And typically when you go to a bank, the bank is always very uncomfortable with our financial statements. So how do we?
You're saying you were badly planned on finance. Why is that? I mean, did you have an expert in-house maybe? Did you have a CA that you could depend on, a CFO?
Yes, we typically have a, so my next question was going to be related to CFO services. For the most period of our growth, we've been without a CFO.
So let's take your question in two parts. One is, how do you plan your finances? See, what happens is that typically an MSME will have a chartered accountant who would advise based on the objectives which are set. So most of the time the MSME will have a single objective with regard to finances: you save my tax. So what happens is that the chartered accountant says, okay, you want to save tax, so you report less profit. The moment you report less profit, you save tax. But unfortunately, what happens is that in the what can I say, myopic vision, you fail to realize that 3 years later, when you want to expand and you want to raise funds, you need a stronger balance sheet, you need a stronger income statement. Now all this while you have been reporting lower profits. And now 3 years later, you can't go and blame your chartered accountant saying that, hey, you know, my finances are screwed up and I'm not able to raise funds. So what you need to do is, you need to give right objective to your consultant, saying that while of course tax saving is on the cards, but we also need to plan our finances in such a way that in future, if we have to raise money, the books have to be strong enough to sustain that kind of fundraise option. So that's point one. Point two, yes, see today with changing regulations, what has happened is that role of a CFO has moved from the back room to the boardroom. Getting a quality financial advice for MSME is a must. It's like oxygen supply, you know. So the good news is that now there are a lot of outsourced CFO services available.
You were talking about fundraising. Was it easy for you?
It's never easy, right? But yeah, it's been a good journey. It's been a very interesting journey. Especially we are in a space where it's a pretty technical product. So it's always been hard to sort of talk to investors and sort of give them an overview of where we are going to get to. And finance is a very, very competitive space. Like there are just too many strong players in that space. So it's been, and what we are building right now is something that is very foresighted. It's probably going to change the industry in the next 5 years. So it's been tough, but we've been very lucky enough to actually find the right kind of investors. Typically, it's the more difficult challenge is to find investors who are aligned to your vision. And to do that in just an hour's meeting with them is the harder part.
In fact, one of my questions is going to be, and we need advice on that, is that, see, we've been very debt focused. Obviously, those are my options. I would like to know what are my other options. See, because we've dabbled in so many opportunities, and then in your growth journey, you get different kind of advisors. And we don't know which are the right ones to take, what is the right options available. So are there any options available to us as other than debt?
Okay, so let me tell you, there is some bit of good news here. There's a silver lining to your dark cloud, and that is there are a lot of options available. In terms of India being the second largest incubation market in the world after US, there are a lot of funding options available, and in variety of formats. Like for example, you can approach an angel investor if you are at that stage, or you can approach an incubator where you can kind of incubate your venture there, or at a slightly growth stage you can talk about a private equity investors. In fact, there are a lot of investor meetups, there are a lot of investor clubs. In fact, I have a few of my friends running those investor clubs where those investors they form a club, and then they every month they meet, where a startup would showcase their idea or opportunity, and few of the investors from the club would like to go ahead and invest whatever they can.
In fact, as he's saying, right, I mean networks, like we've raised funds through Lead Angels networks, which is similar to Mumbai Angels. So they really help us quite a lot, because in a sense, because you don't have that much time with the investors, but you have time with these. They have the time to listen to you and understand who you are, and they actually enable you to connect with the right investors who are aligned or who are looking for similar startups.
But how does it work? As in, do they ask you for part of equity, or how does that work?
Yeah, essentially what happens is that, see, whenever you are raising money, it could be either in the form of debt, which could be secured or unsecured, which you are very much aware of. And then there is equity. So obviously, you know, what they do is they become your partners in growth. So what they look for is, they look for a time horizon till which they stay invested. They look for a smooth exit, and they look for the kind of returns that they have, because at the end of the day, they are risking on you, they are risking on your team, they are risking on your idea. So obviously their appetite for return is going to be higher.
Completely out of time on this episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. If you have any questions or want to be featured here on the show, write in on leadersoftomorrowtimesgroup.com. On social media, tweet at me personally, it's Ananda_J or LOT_ET now. On Facebook, our page is Leaders of Tomorrow on ET now, or call us on that number you see on your screen. We promise to have all your questions answered. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.